Good evening and welcome to Rights and Democracy's launch of the Just Cause Eviction 2022 State House campaign. My name is Tom Proctor. I am the Housing Justice Organizer for Rights and Democracy, Vermont. 18 months ago, I was part of a small group of activists, organizations, and councillors that are looking into ways in which we could alleviate the housing crisis in Burlington. We knew there was no silver bullet for the issue, but there were tried and trusted policies that have been implemented elsewhere that made a material difference in the lives of everyday people and their ability to find safe and reliable housing. The policy we identified as the most needed at this moment was just cause eviction. This policy ensures that if you reliably pay rent and you look after your home, you have a right to stay there. A low bar as tenant protections go, but critically important one. Under our current laws, landlords can arbitrarily decide to evict their tenants with as little as 60 days notice, meaning you can pay your rent, look after your home, respect your neighbors, be part of your community, and you can still be told to leave for no reason whatsoever. The more insidious threat of this law, however, is the eviction cases that don't go through the courts and therefore don't get recorded. This is seen in the form of de facto evictions, when a landlord refuses to sign a new lease with the current tenants. With this law, landlords that keep their units in a state of disrepair, leaky pipes, mold on the walls, dangerous electrics, windows that let out the heat and leave tenants with heating bills in the hundreds every month in the winter. Landlords have no incentive to address these issues in the slums that they're renting, because the vacancy rate in Burlington currently sits at 1 to 2%, and apartments are frequently rented sight unseen. We have made it cheaper and easier to replace a tenant than to weatherize your property or to fix the pipes or to talk with your tenant and fix the problem that way. As there are few affordable apartments being made, there is no competition for tenants to move to. In Burlington and across Vermont, tenants are paying more and more money for units in worse and worse conditions, and no cause eviction adds fuel to the fire. In March 2021, the people of Burlington decided enough was enough. After multiple public hearings, 3 committee votes, and a full council vote just to get just cause on the ballot, we followed through with a kick-ass grassroots-driven campaign and won the 63.9% yes vote. It was a proud night knowing that we had secured some measure of protection for tenants. In the future, renters in Burlington could feel secure in their homes without the arbitrary threat of eviction over their heads. We may have won that night, but the fight is far from over. The Burlington Just Cause Charter change now waits for approval in the State House, and without that approval, just cause eviction for Burlington will die, and the housing crisis will continue to rage. We need allies inside and outside Montpelier, activists and lawmakers, tenants and organizations, community members like everyone on this call, to join with us and fight to have just cause eviction approved. Tonight, I am privileged to be joined by a number of those allies that have already joined forces with us in this campaign. We'll be hearing from their perspective why housing protections are so important, how JCE will help, and why now is the time to act. After hearing from our partners, we'll be officially launching our brand spanking new Just Cause Eviction website, taking a tour and giving a quick demonstration of how you can make a difference in just under a minute. I hope you'll join me in that action to round off the night. My first speaker this evening is someone I would consider to be a founding member of this coalition, a person who works on the front lines of the eviction crisis every day and knows firsthand the devastating effects no cause has on our community. From Vermont Legal Aid, Devon Ayres.
Thanks, Tom. We're very excited to be part of this launch, and I'm looking forward to the next step in this campaign. So in 2019, Vermont Legal Aid published a report about eviction prevention based on an analysis of eviction data from 2 representative counties, Lamoille and Windsor. This report found that before the pandemic, 70% of filed evictions were for non-payment. The other 30% were for other reasons: sale of a property, breach of lease or the law, or no cause. The reason landlords are filing for eviction cases has changed dramatically since we last studied that data. In 2021, while a majority of cases are still filed for non-payment, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of no-cause cases. This year, we have seen no cause as grounds for eviction 50% of the time. In no-cause cases, landlords can still ask for money judgments for back rent, but they differ from non-payment cases in one fundamental way. In a case that is filed for non-payment, tenants can pay the full amount of money that is owed to the landlord and the case will be dismissed. But in a no-cause case, paying all the rent will not make the court dismiss the action. Landlords have the right to end the tenancy for no reason, even after they are fully paid. When a landlord files for no-cause eviction, it does not matter if the apartment has been the tenant's home for many years. It doesn't matter if the tenant has a good history of paying rent. It doesn't matter if rules were never broken or if the tenants were really great. On a weekly basis, we are watching as whole families get kicked out of homes that they have lived in for years. We are mostly powerless in this situation. There are almost no defenses to no-cause eviction except for retaliation or discrimination. All we can do is try to find ways to slow down the cases and to buy tenants more time. But every week I have to deliver bad news. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. The law does not protect you. And then I listen as the panic and desperation set in and do my best to hold their hands through the process. Thanksgiving week, a family of 5 that I was working with who always paid their rent and never had a lease violation were served with a writ of possession. They have 3 children under the age of 5 and have been looking for a new home since they were notified about the eviction several months ago. I have another family who were rehoused at the beginning of the pandemic after years of homelessness. 2 of their children have severe disabilities and are in stable schools with supports they need for the first time in years. They've paid their rent and followed the rules, but they too will lose their home later this month when they have a final hearing. They will be living precariously again, away from the security that they have only recently come to enjoy. When we do this, we're sending families out into a rental landscape where there is literally no place to go, where the cost of apartments is increasing dramatically faster than wages. We tarnish good rental histories and make it more difficult for them to rent again. And we add to the continued need for other social safety nets because now these families need a motel, they need housing search, they need support to keep their kids in school or in childcare. The stress makes it harder for people to stay employed and to take care of their medical needs. The list goes on and on. One eviction will impact the whole family for a very, very long time. These are only 2 of the many, many stories we come across every week in our work. We must do everything we can to keep people housed, and we must end the unjust policy of turning people out from their homes where there is no good reason to. There's no better time to enact a policy that protects families, and we're really excited to continue work on just cause eviction in the legislature. We'll be there every step of the way. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Devin, and thank you for sharing those stories because they seldom get told. And I really appreciate all the work that you do. My next speaker represents a stalwart organization for justice in our community. Delivering a statement from the Executive Director of the Peace and Justice Center, Soraya Hightower, we have the Peace and Justice Community Engagement Coordinator, Grace Thiel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Tom. My name is Grace Thiel, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Peace and Justice Center, and I'm so excited to be here today on behalf of PJC. Today is a soft launch for this campaign, but it is not the start of this campaign. This campaign started in the 1980s because there was a need then, over 30 years ago. Just cause is a common sense policy. If you haven't done anything wrong, you've paid your rent on time, and your landlord doesn't need the property for their own residence, you should not have to move out of your apartment. In a market as tight as Burlington's, our residents can't take the risk of complaining about low quality housing for fear of retaliation. We have data in hand that discrimination based on gender, race, and immigration status is not an outlier, but it's the norm right here in Vermont. Just cause eviction is the right policy because it is the right thing to do. It doesn't matter if it's 1988 or 2021. It is what community care looks like. It is what justice looks like. And this policy in particular is the right policy because it is a compromise. A careful mix of feedback from renters and rental organizations, from property owners and managers, from housing activists, and from politicians across the aisle. But 30 years ago, just cause failed when other interests made seemingly salient arguments that ultimately won over what is right. The same type of folks tried again at a local level, and I wish that those opposing this were worthy of compromising with, but they're not. A group of presumably white but certainly anonymous folks co-opting the language of racial justice to try to fearmonger folks into voting no. Using female fragility language to fearmonger folks into voting no. Another group of realtors spreading what they eventually knew was lies to sow seeds of doubt on constitutionality of just cause eviction, a policy implemented over millions of US residents in cities and states across the US. But this time we were better organized with more data and more allies, and it passed the Burlington voters with 63% of the vote. But that's only half of the fight. The realtors and some of the landlords will try to fight this, and it won't be in good faith, although their gaslighting will often make it seem like it is. The most dangerous tactics they will use to present a more neutral or reasonable stance. Just cause eviction is a neutral policy. It evens the playing field between property owners and renters. It is a reasonable policy. Any property owner or manager who actually respects and cares for their tenants won't even be affected by this. And so they will pretend to be neutral and reasonable as they throw enough dust up that hopefully the state will do nothing. And we can't let that happen. We have to follow the will of the people, the Burlington voters who overwhelmingly supported this reasonable and compassionate just policy. The status quo in this case, as in most, is unfortunately an unjust case. So we have to be better organized with more data and more allies. Today is another step in that journey, and I'm so excited to be here virtually with all of you taking this step. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, and yeah, such powerful words as well. Our next speaker this evening is the research director for an organization that focuses on what matters most for the future of Vermont. From Voices for Vermont's Children, Sarah Thiel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Tom. I'm really happy to be here tonight and to see all of you. I look at a lot of data, a lot of research, and I know that housing is one of the more well-researched direct lines between housing and health. Now, in this last year and a half, almost 2 years, we've seen that, we saw that line drawn within days, right? Like the pandemic started and immediately everybody was aware of how important housing was for health and how immediate that needed to be met. But I'll also say that it's not just health, it's education. It's links with engagement with the state child welfare system. All of these things are resting on a foundation of whether or not a family has safe and stable housing. And when we're neglecting to provide that for families, we're undercutting all the investments that we're making in all of these other areas. We believe that every child has a right to be housed, and not only to be housed, but to have a place to call home. And in Vermont, where we have 16,000-ish housing units that are occupied by families with children, we know that's not the majority of all our renters, but we can't have a state that doesn't make room for families in our rental housing stock. We can't have a state where some parts of the state are accessible to families and others are not. And that is the direction that we've been heading. We think that what's needed, and we welcome this policy because we think it will invite us all into a conversation at the state level about the fundamental shift in power that has to happen to give all kids the right to housing, which is that we really need to examine how much the market system can meet human needs, which is to say that it can't. That much has been made clear. We need to point our imaginations toward a system where housing does not have the capacity to be exploitative, but rather a system where it is in fact a right for everyone, especially including families with children. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Currently in the maelstrom of fighting for reproductive freedoms across northern New England and indeed the entire country, I'm particularly grateful for her presence this evening, owing to the momentous day it is for these freedoms. Vice President of Vermont Public Policy for Planned Parenthood, Lucy Rose LaRouche.
Oh, hi, everyone, and thank you, Tom, for that nice introduction, and to the whole Rights and Democracy team for inviting Planned Parenthood into this really important conversation in the Just Cause Eviction Coalition. As Tom mentioned, my name is Lucy LaRouche, the Vice President of Vermont Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Vermont Action Fund and Planned Parenthood Northern New England. We are really proud to support the Just Cause Eviction campaign because we clearly see how legal and fair housing practices intersect with public health and reproductive justice. Health outcomes for people from marginalized populations, including those living in poverty, are significantly lower than white upper income people. When people can be arbitrarily evicted, it can put their lives and health in danger and spiral into greater burdens. Individuals and families deserve better protections so that they can live in a secure environment and raise their children knowing that they will not be evicted for things like asking their landlord to make a life and safety repair to their apartment, or because they live in a city with a tight housing market and the landlord wants to charge more for rent, or because the landlord is racist, sexist, homophobic, doesn't like children, or other reasons beyond a renter's control and beyond our imaginations, perhaps. Renters should be afforded dignity and compassion, along with the security that comes with justice-driven housing practices. This work really is urgent, and Planned Parenthood is pleased to work with all of you to pass the Burlington City Charter change and enact a Just Cause Eviction ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Lucy. For our next speaker, we have a tireless advocate and organizer fighting for food security across our state and in our schools, Hunger Free Vermont's Universal School Meals Campaign Manager and Barre City Councillor, Teddy Wazazak.
Yes, thank you so much, Tom. And thank you to RAD and all of the amazing activists up in Burlington who have been working on this for so long. So I'm happy to be here on behalf of Hunger Free Vermont, and we are happy to be supporting this very important campaign. Hunger Free Vermont, I remember taking, when Tom reached out to me about joining the campaign, I took it back to the rest of the team and I explained what was happening. And I said, oh, is this something we should sign on to? And it was like, yeah. Why are you asking us about this? It's such an obvious thing and such a very real need up in Burlington, and I would argue in communities all across the state. So Hunger Free Vermont is an anti-poverty, anti-hunger organization, which believes very strongly in systemic changes and intersectionality. Hunger Free Vermont understands that if you don't have stable housing, you're not going to have stable access to food security. If you're not able to access transportation, if you're not able to access good wages, good health care, you're not going to be able to take care of yourself and take care of your family in the way that is so desperately needed. So Hunger Free Vermont is, as Tom mentioned, advocating strongly for the Universal School Meals Program to ensure that every child in every school across Vermont has access to breakfast and lunch for free. And just as important as that is making sure that kids, as Sarah was talking about earlier, have a safe place to go home to, and that is all about Just Cause Eviction. If we have so many students all over the state that are dealing with homelessness right now, and it's an issue that is affecting the community up in Burlington very strongly. So Hunger Free Vermont is 100% behind this campaign. We very much hope that the legislature will push this through this biennium. It's great to see so many representatives on here, and special shout out to my hometown rep, Tommy Walls, for being on the call. So thank you all for being here. I don't want to repeat what everyone else has so eloquently put before me, but really hoping that this gets over the finish line, and Hunger Free Vermont's committed to doing everything we can to making that a reality. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Teddy. Now representing our union support for Just Cause Eviction, we have a tireless fighter for workers and worker rights, Executive Director of the AFL-CIO Vermont, Liz Medina.
Great, thank you so much. And it's been a rough day with electricity and internet for me, so I hope you all can hear me. Thank you. Yes, I'm the Executive Director of Vermont State Labor Council. We are our state's labor federation of unions representing over 11,000 union members across the state, but we also strive to represent all working Vermonters. And I myself come from a working class family, and I've been a renter for almost 20 years now. And I bring up these two aspects of my life, one because they're shared by thousands of other Vermonters, and two, because they have real material implications that we sometimes forget about in terms of developing policy. And that's certainly the case when it comes to just cause eviction. So when it comes to being a working class person, what that essentially means at the end of the day is that I depend on an employer to make a living. I don't own my own business. I don't have assets I can live off of. So I'm really subjected to the whims of my employer. And likewise, as a renter, I don't own my own home, right? It's a simple fact that sometimes we forget about. There's a lot of people who are in this situation, and that means we're vulnerable to decisions and people with a lot more power than us day to day. And so as a labor organizer and a labor federation, just cause is a really foundational concept and principle. It's one of the most foundational clauses in all of our contracts because it provides for a very base level of security for workers. And unfortunately, we do need it because of this power imbalance. We need just cause in our contracts to protect workers from capriciously losing their job, losing their access to make a living. Unfortunately, it is the case, you know, when you have this power imbalance that you can, as a worker, face retaliation for bringing up problems at work, discrimination. There's lots of nepotism and favoritism I hear about on a daily basis. And just cause is definitely needed to ensure that there is some kind of security for workers. And the same applies to being a renter and being a tenant. And, you know, I myself, you know, have had fairly good luck with renting over the last 20 years, but I can tell you, I do all of my own repairs because I've heard way too many horror stories from friends and acquaintances who suddenly didn't have their lease renewed because they became a problem tenant because they, you know, dared to mention that something was wrong with their rental unit. And I cannot even imagine the headache of dealing with suddenly losing housing and having my whole life thrown up in the air, especially in a very tight housing market like Vermont. And this is also, again, a global pandemic still happening. And when you take away someone's housing and you make someone so vulnerable to losing that housing, you really jeopardize our pandemic efforts as well, because you don't have access to sanitation anymore. You may be finding yourself in a more crowded living situation. So just cause eviction is so important. It's a fundamental issue of justice and also ensuring that we can make it through this pandemic. And so I'm just here to, you know, put the question on everyone's mind and think about this as you go into the legislative session. You know, which side are you on? Because this isn't an issue of two equal parties that deserve equal consideration. This is an issue of inequality between a landlord that has immense power over the lives of their tenants. And, you know, I think as a society and as legislators, our job, or the job should be, to balance these inequalities and to create democracy in our communities and in our governance as well through policies like just cause. So thank you so much for your time. I encourage you all to get just cause done, and I would love to see it actually across the state.
Thank you so much, Liz. Now, representing another founding member of our coalition, we have an organizer who is also on the front lines of housing work, statewide housing navigator from CVOEO, Ryan Murphy.
Hello. Yes, my name is Ryan Murphy. I use she, her, and hers. I'm the statewide housing navigator at CVOEO's housing advocacy programs team, which encompasses the mobile home program, Vermont Tenants, and the Fair Housing Project. I work directly with tenants who connect with us via the Tenants' Rights Hotline. Specifically, I work with people who call in with issues requiring research, follow-up, or some kind of support services. And I talk with people who are experiencing no-cause terminations on an almost daily basis. No cause termination very clearly harms our neighbors' lives, and I would like to briefly share some anonymized versions of stories that I've heard. I spoke with a couple who had lived in an apartment for several years when their landlord suddenly terminated for no cause. This came as a shock to them. They just spent several $1,000s on a new car because they hadn't anticipated any other significant expenses. But now they had to unexpectedly drain their remaining savings to put towards first and last month's rent and a security deposit. To make matters worse, the housing market had become so competitive since their last move that even after searching for months, the best deal they could find cost $500 more per month than their previous rental. The tenants explained to me that it would take at least 2 years to replenish their savings account. Despite responsible budgeting, the unexpected move took away their hard-earned safety net. One of the tenants told me, "I say with no hyperbole that being no cause evicted was the single worst thing to ever happen in my life and was the worst thing another person has ever knowingly and intentionally done to me." I spoke with a single mother whose landlord terminated her lease for no cause, uprooting her by surprise. She wondered if the landlord saw her as easily disposable because she made low wages and had a young child, but she had no objective way to confirm her suspicion that she was experiencing discrimination. Her landlord simply said she was terminated for no cause. She told me that this made her feel like a throwaway person and nearly caused her to relapse after more than a decade in recovery from drug addiction. If a landlord can terminate any tenancy without a given reason, they can use no cause eviction as a cover for illegal and unfair housing practices. I spoke with a couple who were hesitant to report a leaking ceiling to their landlord because they'd already called him about another issue earlier in the month. And while this couple knew that they would be protected from retaliatory eviction for a few months after their complaint, they also knew that the landlord could choose not to renew their lease at the end of the year for no cause. And like many renters in Vermont, this couple accepted substandard living conditions in exchange for housing stability. As the law currently stands, even a tenant who abides by their lease and pays their rent in full and on time can be terminated without cause, as many have pointed out. Renters deserve to feel stable, and it is fundamentally unfair that they can be thrusted into housing instability at any time simply because they are renters. I have received countless calls like the ones that I just described, and over the course of the pandemic, tenants have increasingly expressed that if they are evicted, they will have no place to go. Our state has such a significant housing shortage that termination can drive people into homelessness or out of the state entirely. Under a no-cause termination, renters can be thrust into this for no reason at all, other than that they are renters. While Vermont tenants are legally protected from discrimination and retaliation, these protections too often go unenforced because many tenants lack the time or financial means to pursue their rights in a court of law. Eliminating no cause as a reason for termination will help hold landlords accountable to existing law and increase renter stability. A just cause provision is vital to creating a more equitable, fair, and just Vermont. So CBOEO fully supports it.
Wow, thank you so much, Ryan. Those stories were incredible, and it's why this is so important and enrages me, to be honest. But thank you for those stories. Yeah. The Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition has been involved in this fight for far longer than we have. Unfortunately, David Martins, their executive director, is actually another housing event this evening. These schedule clashes happen all the time. But in a show of solidarity, he has kindly sent a video message of support.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Martins, and I'm the director at the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. I wish I could be with you live and in person tonight to kick off this important campaign, supporting just cause eviction. At VAHC, our mission is to increase access to safe, affordable, and decent housing for all Vermonters. But we recognize that achieving this mission is much more than getting a roof over someone's head. It's about housing justice, housing choice, sustainability. There's much more to it than just a building. Our home should be a harbor from the storms of life. And I'm sure we would all agree that having one is a basic human right. I'm sure we would also all agree that maintaining one and keeping one is stressful enough. Just Cause Eviction helps lessen some of those anxieties. The unfathomably low vacancy rate in Burlington makes finding a solution when someone has been evicted a near impossibility, and it further tightens the already constricted housing market. We often talk about the solution to the housing crisis being a three-legged stool of funding capital investments, financial assistance, and supportive services. The question is, what good is a stool if it is not safe and not secure? This important policy is a vital part of that security. Supporting this important legislation is obvious when you look at the complete picture of combating the housing crisis in Vermont. We at VAHC look forward to working with all of you to achieve the goal that we all share, making sure that all Vermonters have access to safe, affordable, and decent housing, and the tools that they need in order to sustain it.
Thank you for David for sending that one in. Now, our umbrella organizations help us set us up for success and connect us with folks we otherwise couldn't reach. As they assist us with our regional campaigns, we support them in their nationwide efforts. Here to speak on that is the Homes Guarantee organizer for People's Action, coming in from Chicago, is Grace White.
Hey, thanks so much, Tom. My name's Grace. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an organizer on the Homes Guarantee campaign, which is a national campaign run by tenant-led organizations from all over the country. And I'm really excited to be here to paint the picture of like why this fight in Vermont around just cause eviction is really part of a broader tenant movement that is building the power that we need to win truly safe, sustainable, and actually affordable homes for folks across the country. So I think like most people know, over the course of the past 2 years, tenants across the country have faced really unprecedented conditions amongst the global pandemic. For the first year of the pandemic, there was either little or no eviction moratoria to protect tenants and keep them in their homes. And oftentimes rental assistance funds ran out of money or couldn't move the money quick enough. And so tenants across the country were being forced from their homes during a global pandemic. And I think created a lot of space for tenants across the country to begin forming organizations like tenants unions in reaction to that. And so what we saw was tenants across the country in places like Burlington, Vermont, and Shelbyville, Tennessee, and Kansas City, Missouri, where I'm from, came together and said, like, in this moment, we deserve not to be evicted. And in the long run, we deserve additional protections to make sure that we can stay in our home, like just cause eviction. And so I think over the course of the last like year and a half, we have seen more organization built in the last year and a half than we have in quite a few years among tenants across the country. And we hear folks demanding things like just cause eviction, a national tenants bill of rights, rent control, and protections to keep folks in their homes during this pandemic, but also in the much longer term outside of that. And I think like you all in Vermont are on the front lines of a really important fight that won't just impact people in Burlington, but is a part of a larger fight across the country that if tenants see that we can win things like just cause eviction in places like Vermont, I think there's so many folks that will pick up that same fight, right? So really excited to be here and can already see like all of the transformation that's coming from this campaign and that will continue to come from this campaign, and want to extend solidarity from myself, but also our grassroots tenants leaders from across the country who are fighting for just cause eviction, rent control, and ultimately truly safe, sustainable, and affordable housing for all of us in the long run. Thanks so much, Tom.
And thank you, Grace. Next up is Rights and Democracy's founding executive director. Without him, none of this would be possible. So here to speak on RAD's role in our housing justice efforts in Vermont is James Haslam.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks everyone for coming tonight. It's incredible to see the array of coalition supporters, organizations here, of elected folks on the local level and the state level, and we are super excited about this effort. And as Grace said, this is a key fight in the fight for housing as being a human right. Rights and Democracy is a proud member of People's Action, and part of having a homes guarantee is a just cause eviction. And over the years of doing organizing work across the state, we see how interconnected our housing rights are to healthcare, are to economic justice, but as has been talked about powerfully by the previous speakers, are connected to our basic struggle for human rights, for racial justice, for gender justice, for a movement that we can actually have a people-centered economy where people have the right to live and work in dignity. And that's we got our work cut out for us. I got into this movement back in 1999 when I was living in Barre, Vermont, and I started volunteering at the local homeless shelter, the Good Samaritan, and I was appalled by seeing the fact that there was families that were in this shelter, and there was many people who had full-time jobs and were homeless. And part of the right to housing is being able to make sure that every single person has the right to have a healthy, safe home. And that starts with being able to have just cause eviction. And so we are thrilled to be part of this movement with you all. Landlords and property owners have had a loud voice in public policy in our communities and across this country. And it's time for tenants to be organized. And so we're proud to be part of People's Action's efforts on this, and look forward to working with all of you to organize tenants across the state to have a powerful voice, starting in Burlington, but moving across the state to get just cause as a policy. So thanks everyone for coming, and we're excited to keep working with you.
Thank you so much, James. This next woman should need no introduction at this point. An activist that walks a walk, that asks the hard questions, and who puts herself in the shoes of those she lifts up. Hopefully she is now well rested following her 27 days on the State House steps to pressure the governor to extend and expand the motel voucher program, and was successful, may I add. My good friend, Brenda Siegel.
Hi, everyone. I think that rest is going to actually take quite a while. So this has been an amazing launch and an amazing event with incredible speakers. So y'all hard to follow. I know that I'm so grateful to be here, and just cause eviction is exactly the step in the right direction, especially coming out of what we just did. This protects all renters, and it is just the first city that we need to do it in. We need to do it across the state and across the country. It protects seniors, families, and everyone. It protects all income levels. And most importantly, it helps to stabilize the rental market. I can tell you that across this state, the instability of the rental market is a giant factor in homelessness and fear or impossibility of Vermonters settling here. I am going to take you back a few years. When I was in my 20s, I lived in, and I had a young child, and I lived in seriously subpar housing where my landlords had all the power. As a low-income single mom, I had struggled to access the rental market at all. And if I were to remain housed, I had to just put up with anything that the landlord did, regardless of landlord-tenant law. Why? Because of no cause eviction. While retaliatory eviction is not legal, no cause is, and that was what I had to face had I spoken up. The thing is that the last apartment that I had in this category was so bad. Rats, black mold, my landlord would just walk in and out without notice. Sometimes when I was in the shower, when I had a young child, and I would hear him calling to me from the bottom of my stairs, he would be inside my house. He would scream at me and threaten eviction if I asked him to do anything. And he would also threaten that I would lose my housing voucher through Section 8. He had he done that, my son and I would have experienced homelessness. But it was so bad that I did withhold my rent. It was so bad that I did everything by the book, and still my landlord tried to evict me. Luckily, I got a commitment from Section 8 to not take my voucher away, and I countersued, and eventually he settled. But I was terrified, and it just as easily could have gone the other way, as it had so many other times in my life, and we would have had nowhere to go. I want to be clear that the only reason that I did not lose my voucher was because I took the risk of trying to advocate for myself. And though so many times I had not been able to or been effective at it, I had support from family and had privilege of experience speaking up and seeing others do the same throughout my life. There are thousands of Vermonters who that fear is a reality, and as it had been so many times for me before. The risk was so high, I got lucky. I found another apartment. I had a good caseworker at the housing authority. I had a family who helped me with a cosign of the next lease so that though I did not have landlord references, I could be housed. And most importantly, it is not now where there is simply no housing. This is exactly where we need to go. As was just mentioned, I just spent 27 nights and 28 days on the State House steps, demanding that the governor fully reinstate the GA motel housing program. And I'm not yet ready to speak to what that did to either my mind or my body in just that short period of time. I will eventually, but I have not been ready. But finally on the 28th day, with the help of organizations like RAD, Vermonters who spoke up, Interfaith Action, and that's why it happened, we were able to succeed. But we met so many people that are homeless solely because of no-cause evictions. That's it. And we have a rental market that doesn't exist. And that means that every single person that we evict for no cause will be at risk of not finding a home. Low income, middle income, and so on. And those experiencing homelessness right now will never be able to find stable housing in that situation, as is happening right now. But the problem is that they directly are connected, no cause eviction and homelessness. So whether you are in Vermont, if you're in Vermont or across the country, whether you're in Burlington or Brattleboro or the Northeast Kingdom or anywhere, this impacts you and you're going to need to be part of this fight. And we can't have this rental market that leaves the most vulnerable in the current pandemic world. It's actually all but a few privileged to reckon with no cause eviction. This ordinance carries with it protective measures for tenants and adequate exemptions for landlords who would need it. This should be an easy yes for anyone who says that they want tenants to have rights. So sorry. To anyone, I can't even stop it. I'll just turn it off. So sorry. For anyone who says that they want tenants to have rights that lead to equity. We also know that no cause eviction disproportionately impacts communities of color, low income folks, LGBTQIA, and yes, people in family makeups like my own, single parents, and especially single moms. No cause eviction kept me and my son in unhealthy and unsafe housing for way too many years until I mustered the courage to risk losing our housing for speaking up. We need to build a better and stronger system of protections because ultimately it serves every last one of us. Our unstable rental market, no cause eviction, and its platform of inequity is making us a less strong Vermont. We need a system in which we would never be in the position where we had to sleep outside to demand shelter for anyone. If we had adequate housing and adequate protections, we would not have ever seen the housing crisis as it is right now, and as it is across Vermont especially. It is time to protect all Vermonters from unjust housing insecurity and loss. What we have now is not just. I am proud to support just cause eviction, and I hope that all of you will join me in going above and beyond this moment of showing up here to work alongside RAD and all the amazing leaders we just heard from and advocates and activists in Burlington to do this work that we'll need to do in the legislature and take this to make this charter change so that we can eventually have it across our state and across the country. It's essential that you all become part of this fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. That was amazing. Finally, tonight, we have a message from one of Chittenden County's most promising senators, an advocate and ally for just cause before it even passed on the ballot. and a strong and vital partner going forward. Sending in a video message this evening because she couldn't be here thanks to her schedules in conflict, we have Senator Keisha Rum.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm Senator Keisha Rum Hinsdale, and I particularly want to express gratitude to Tom Proctor and Rad for advancing just cause eviction to the legislature. And I'm sure there are city councilors present for this launch event that helped usher it through the charter change process within the city and get it before Burlington voters who, with nearly 2/3 majority, voted to advance just cause eviction for legislative consideration. For those of you who may not know, I'm on Senate Government Operations, the Senate Committee of Jurisdiction over charter changes, and I'm proud to support this charter change and to help advance it through the legislature. I really am here to help make sure that it starts off with the strongest possible chance, first in the House and then in the Senate, in a busy year, but one where we should really be focused on housing and ensuring that as many Vermont families stay in housing as possible. This is a matter of trying to end unjust evictions, evictions that do not have cause. And we know that in Burlington and Chittenden County and across the state, there are inequities in who is forced to rent, who is in the position of renting, what they deal with when dealing with a landlord. We have the greater likelihood that Black Vermonters and that women are renters and face higher rates of eviction. So as a woman of color in the state Senate, I'm able to carry that message about who is most impacted into the halls of power, into the Capitol in Montpelier. Finally, just on a personal note, as I thought about what I would say, I was reflecting on my experience as a sophomore at the University of Vermont. I lived with, of course, college roommates, people who cared about social justice. But when our landlord would add charges to our bill, charges for his own time spent on being a landlord, charges for his credit card payments, I was the one who was documenting that and built a case to go before the Housing Review Board. And I remember, as a sophomore, I may seem confident and likely to speak up, but even my roommate said, I just don't know what this will mean for us, our future ability to rent, and I felt really alone in that process. And I think this change in the charter really tells renters, we've got your back. We're here to fight alongside you against unjust evictions. And so I really appreciate this proposal. I think it has an important place in our conversation around our housing crisis and how to help people build stability where they live and build toward the future that they want and need in Vermont. So thank you again for including me in this, and let's get this passed.
Big thank you for Keisha for sending in that message there. And a big thank you to all of our speakers. Your voices are critical and your stories and experiences are what we need to win tenant protections in Vermont. You are also eloquent and you're really very thoughtful in your messaging, and I thank you all for taking part in this. I also thank everyone for joining us this evening, and I appreciate everyone's support and everyone's strength as we go forward into the 2022 legislative session. We have talked a lot tonight about why just cause eviction is so important, but we haven't talked about what you can do to help. A rise in democracy that we know that people are busy, that you work long hours, many people have more than one job, we all have too many responsibilities, and it's difficult to dedicate the time that you would like to the important issues that we are always fighting for, and we always have to fight for. But we want to make sure that your voice is heard in this, and that activism doesn't have to be time-consuming or difficult to get involved with. I'm going to ask our comms manager now, Annie, to load up our new Just Cause BTV website. This is the Just Cause Eviction website and your point of truth for this campaign. On the site, you can find out about important information about Just Cause Eviction, why we need it, and what a Just Cause ordinance would look like in Burlington. You can also find out all about our partners in this campaign and learn more about their missions and their purpose. We'll be adding to this as more partners come onto our coalition. There is even an area where you can learn about how a charter change is created and how it is passed in Montpelier, laid out in an easy to read, easy to digest format. We let you know where we are with the campaign, and we'll keep this updated so you can stay informed. There is a Get Involved section for those looking to volunteer some hours in the campaign and how to get that ball rolling, and a section for organizations to sign up to be a part of this amazing coalition. We would also like to hear your story. In Vermont, either you have a housing horror story or you know someone with one. If you wish to share yours, click the link below to tell us what happened. The feature I'm most excited about, though, is this easy to use, quick to complete contact your rep action. If you go to the justcausebtv.com homepage, scroll down to this big red window, in just 3 clicks, you can send a message of support for Just Cause Eviction to all the representatives and senators that represent you in the State House. You click this button that says easy as 1, 2, 3, and it will load this site. Fill in your information, name, address, email, and phone number, and then click next. The next page to load will show all the lawmakers that represent your area and the people who will be receiving this message. Below their smiling faces is a pre-written message of support for JCE. This message is fully customizable, and we encourage everyone to take the time to say why you personally believe in tenant protections and support Just Cause Eviction. The subject line is also changeable. When you're done editing, or if the message we have created represents your view, click send, and that message of solidarity will be sent to your representatives. Just 3 clicks and you add your voice with ours. Now is your chance to take part in this action. I'm going to give everyone 1 minute to send your message to the lawmakers in your area. Please use your computer browser or your mobile device to access this website, and we'll stick the URL in the chat and on the screen so you all know where to go. Well, some of you may have got there. Some of you may want to put in a customizable message, and so it may take you a little longer. But thanks to everyone for doing that. And those that didn't have the opportunity or wish to take their time to craft their own message, I do hope you're going to send your message of support in the next few days. If you're looking to get more involved, we have a huge text banking campaign that's going to be happening every Thursday. You can sign up on the Get Involved link on the website. And we also have a housing work group meeting that meets on the first Wednesday every month. This is usually the time that we have that meeting. So there is also a link that you can click and it will send us a message that you're interested in that. And I'll be reaching out with you to let you know how to get more involved. You can find all the details of Just Cause Eviction on that site. I really do encourage everyone to take a little look. It took 3 frantic days to get that together, so I'd appreciate it. I want to thank all of our incredible coalition partners once again, all the speakers that joined us tonight, all the activists, everyone that has turned up and listened to us. A big thank you to the comms team at RAD for helping me scramble to get all of this together. And just thank you for everyone for showing up and learning about this important work. I hope to see many of you soon, but for now though, good night and everyone have a wonderful evening. Thanks. Bye.